Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church here in Plano, Texas. My name is Reverend Dr. Aija Duelm. I am the minister of this congregation, and as you can hear, I have a cold, which makes my voice a little weird. Can you hear me okay? No. Can we have it louder, microphone, please? Do I restart everything? Yes. Welcome. Welcome here. So glad that you are able to be here today on a Sunday morning in person or joining us online. We always have a few people who are with us at this time online from their homes because for various reasons, mostly for health reasons, they cannot be here with us. But we are here. We are a faith community here. A very unique faith community here in Texas, the one that affirms the dignity of all beings, puts love at the center and works for justice. You know that the first and major function, and I know we will remind you later to turn your cell phones off. The water is wrong, but that's all right. Sorry about the don't be anxious. It's okay to have a backup, sound back music for me too. The first major function of any religion is to welcome people into moral communities, to provide that moral ground, ethical framework through which we look at life, look at the world, and things that we do in this world. But here, what binds us is not a creed, but a covenant. Covenant, our values, and our mission. So that is, the covenant for us is what provides that ethical framework for relationships and for the process of how we, you together. The question is, what is a covenant? What is our covenant here? How it works. And did you know that there's more than one covenant that we have? If you were to guess, how many do we have? 4, very close. 5. We have 5 covenants in this congregation, in this church. We will look at some of them today. Last time that I spoke, that was 2 weeks ago, I talked about accountability to our mission, and mission is one of our covenants, an agreement that we made about why we want to be together. And that's important to talk about first the mission, because we need to know why we want to be together before we decide how we want to be together. So we talked about mission, and today we will consider some other covenants that are important to our faith, and also touch a little bit on why they are quite difficult. They're not easy agreements and promises that we've made to one another. I hope you will engage in this reflection today together with me and in good faith, recognizing that our communal religious life is a continuous process of returning, renewing, and recommitting to the core values and common visions that call us forward together. Wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome here. For the story conversation, I like to come down here, so we need to make sure my mic is on. Is it? Can you hear me? Okay? Awesome. It is a story, I will kind of reread the story, that's why I have the script in me. About your experience in school. Do any of you here remember your first day in school? The very first one, yes? You remember? Not really? No? Yes, some of you do. Some of you really well. I can see that. Okay. So let's try to kind of help others remember too what it may have been like for them. You're going to a new place to start something new you've never done before. Probably exciting, but also maybe just a little bit scary. Because we had a lot of questions. Where am I going to sit? What time do I get to eat? But very important questions, right? Where's the bathroom? And when can I go there? Does the teacher really expect me to do the homework? And when do we get to play and just have fun? For a lot of us, the teacher was able to explain these rules, and life kind of got easier, right? You know, we kind of figured in, settled in. But then you get outside to play, and I'm guessing you may have had a recess or, some kind of free time activity. And there is no teacher to tell you how to do things out there. How can you play where the rules are? So you kind of have to figure it out with other kids that are around you, right? So for example, if you want to play a tag, you kind of need to negotiate what the rules will be. You may just kind of agree that the person who is the tag, will have to count to 10 before they can start chasing others. And so you come up with these rules, you play, but what if other kids do not agree with that rule? Fight. Well, it really is pretty bad if they don't want to play with the same rules. You can try to play by yourself, but I don't think it's very fun to play tag by yourself. Has anyone tried? No? Tag your shoulder? So we kind of need the rules to understand the layout, the groundwork for how we're going to do something together, even if it is fun, just a game, a tag, or another thing. So you do need to have a conversation with the other kids, agree on something so that it would be agreeable and everybody would promise to follow those rules. When we agree to follow some of these rules, we are covenanting with others. And that covenant is a promise about what we're going to do and how we're going to behave. And so even to play a game, we need a covenant. But covenants are not only for a playground. They can be made by people in families, by students, by teachers in school. They can be made in religions too. Our Unitarian Universalist religion has a covenant. The UU covenant was made about 65 years old when some of us were very young. Some of us may not have been born. But back then, there were no Unitarian Universalists. What we had Unitarians and we had Universalists, and they decided they want to play together. But they needed to agree on what the rules will be. And believe you me, that was quite a lot of work to come down to these rules. I probably told this in another sermon some time ago, that it took all night, 4 a.m. in the morning, that finally they came up with the final thing that they could agree. It all had to do with Jesus, but that's, besides the point right now. They made a covenant. They made an agreement, and these were the rules that they called, at that time, 6 principles. You probably have heard that word, principles. they compromised. They had to, give in, kind of compromise on some things that they didn't really want to give up, but they did covenant and started to play the same game. Then 25 years later, they decided all together that they needed more than 6 principles. They needed 7 principles. So they added one more. And then we had 7 principles. We had 6 sources, and you probably know them. And if you don't, our gray hymnals list them in the front. There's a little slight change. There have been a little slight changes made since they were printed, but those were the basic principles, the covenant that was made until last year, 2024. We all came together over 2 years. All Unitarian Universalists participated in a huge conversation to establish our new set of covenant. And we called them values, not principles anymore. Values, all centered in love. And we came up with these. Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence and acknowledge our place in it. Pluralism. We are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all feel welcome and can thrive. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Equity. We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. And as a congregation, we too agreed to follow these rules. We promised to each other to follow these rules that we make, and in this way we covenant with each other. We didn't do a big ceremony to make this covenant. It was a process for us. It was a lot of conversation and then a vote. We are democratic and we vote to agree to these things. But just like kids on a playground play tag, and just like Unitarian Universalists started with the rules 65 years ago, we have right now our values. And before we allow our children and youth to go to their classrooms, we have some gifts for you. These are small cards, wallet cards, that list all the values. So how are we with promises? How are you with promises? How are you with keeping your promises? How are you with making promises? When I think about myself, then I kind of think that I'm pretty good at keeping my promises. I try to think about the commitments that I make, and I attend to them, even though I mess up sometimes. There have been times when I miss an appointment or show up an hour too early. Yes, I have woken somebody up from bed because I didn't pay attention to time zones. And I also forget things, like I really intended to put out the rest of the volunteer survival kits for everyone in the back there after our volunteer appreciation service at the end of August. Well, you have them now. If you were not here for this service, they're outside in the foyer on that small table. When you leave, please take one. Well, it happens, right? We do make mistakes, but these are the kind of things that matter. They matter to me to be with the promises that I make, to follow them, to make amends when I miss them, because I know what it feels like when others fail to keep their promise that they made to me. And then it feels even worse when the other person who's failed the promise blows it off as it was something very unimportant, not a big deal, and it wouldn't matter. So this is why I try to be careful not to promise things that I know I can't do, and make the promises about things that I, in my good faith, believe that I can do. And so there are times when I make promises without knowing the full story, and so I make those promises with just my best intentions at heart. So for an illustration, imagine a commercial transaction for a cell phone contract or some credit card payment, when you're online trying to make a purchase, and then the screen comes up with pages with small letters entitled Terms of Agreement, and you read all of that fine print, right? Yeah, mostly not. We just check the box in good faith that this agreement will work for us. Promises matter, even the little ones. Because when we make a promise, we put something of ourselves emotionally into that transaction. And to have the promise broken feels at some level like a violation. And then we need to engage the repair work, return to our promises, and recommit ourselves to uphold the promises that we make. And yes, some broken promises are much more difficult to restore than others. And there are situations when the promises might need to be rewritten or changed significantly. But in our UU tradition, promises are at the core of our faith. We say that we are a covenantal faith. We call our promises covenants because we do not hold creeds or a set of beliefs that every member is required to recite. For us, and Quakers as well, the acceptance into membership implies the consent to the covenant. When someone becomes a member, they promise each other to behave in certain ways and promise to hold the promises, to hold the covenant, because that is what will hold all of us together in the community. So what are our promises? I just mentioned earlier that we have 5 of them. Most widely known that you already experienced this morning is that aspirational covenant, or the affirmation of faith, that is shaped in a form of a ritual that we say every worship. It is written in a very broad language, tells us to love one another, to help one another, and we say here, love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant. So that is one covenant. Another covenant is a statement of mission, purpose, and values, and also a set of bylaws that describe our operations. I know this is getting pretty boring. We looked at our mission first, we already kind of addressed it, because it's important to consider why we are coming together before we decide how we want to be together. During the message for all ages, we talked about the covenant that is our values, and this is the one that is in UUA bylaws. That's where that boring part comes, right? It's in our bylaws, these values that you have on the wallet cards right now. That's what's unique about our faith. We have bylaws that we read often or look at often. And so then another form of covenant, we are down to the fifth one that you read earlier, Steve was reading it, is the covenant of right relationship, or also called as behavioral covenant. And this kind of covenant is developed by a congregation. Each congregation writes their own. We did it in 2004 when an interim minister, Priscilla Richter, was here. And that meant all of the congregation participated and voted on it to agree to the words that were in this covenant. So, how are we with our promises? With our covenants? Do we find them agreeable to us today? And if yes, how are we with following them and living them? Do we find that we struggle with our covenant? That is actually a difficult one? And that maybe at times we fall short? What do we do when someone's behavior falls out of covenant? Are we ready to call that person back into the covenant? Are we willing to protect our community from behaviors that are harmful? Or do we make exceptions? And if yes, then how many? For everyone? So the covenant that is created through that democratic process meant that equal parties, everyone came together and agreed on the rules of the game, the behaviors, the norms that we will uphold to be able to do what we have set out to do as a community. And it is unique and different from other traditions, because it was not a minister who came with the covenant to give to you. It wasn't God or another deity who came and gave the covenant for you to follow. It was constructed and created together in a conversation. In other traditions, we see different ways of covenant being created. And for example, ancient Israelites did not have the opportunity to be co-creators of the covenant. God gave it to them. The first covenant that was made between God and Noah after the flood, the story is written in Genesis chapter 9, verses 8 through 17. In that first covenant, God promised to never destroy the earth by flood ever again, and gave a rainbow as a sign of that promise. But in return, the Israelites were supposed to do something. They were forbidden to take human life or to drink blood. That was the transaction. The next significant covenant that was made in this tradition between God and Abraham, promising that from Abraham's seed a great nation will be born. A sign of this covenant is that Abraham was supposed to circumcise himself and all of the male members of his household on the 8th day after birth. Again, transaction. And then a very significant covenant that we probably all know about, God made with Israelites, this one, on the Mount Sinai, and this is recounted in Exodus. This covenant listed laws that were mediated through Moses. And among these 613 laws, or mitzvot, are the 10 commandments. In return for adhering to these laws, Israelites will become God's holy nation. That was the deal that God made with Israelites. And if they were not going to follow these laws, there was going to be, and there were, significant consequences in a form of punishment, such as a defeat in war, famine, or plague. And we know, if we read the story further, that they experienced all that because they could not live up all the time to these laws. They fell short. They broke them. They strayed away from the covenant. And for us too, in some congregations, covenants do not work as they should. We have encountered breaches of covenant in our congregation's 50-year history, as well as in our larger denomination. And much of my reflection today is based on a material that was produced by the UUA Commission of Appraisal, and it was called Unlocking the Power of Covenant. This commission of appraisal decided to study covenant in 2020 because they realized that we struggle with it. Just 2 years before that, there was a major breach of our covenant between congregations in our UUA, and it happened here in our southern region. It was over the selection of a director for the southern region, and it led to resignation of several top leaders. Issues of transparency, clear communication, diversity and inclusion, and prudent use of our financial resources were all played a role in this controversy. So one possible reason why we struggle to live in covenant could be that we are failing to address the white supremacy culture and other systems of oppression that leave their imprint on a covenant. And those need to be examined to address the power imbalances. When a covenant does not reflect thoughtful examination of our cultural biases, it turns into a tool for discrimination or gets used as a weapon. Another reason why we might be struggling is that covenants are pretty difficult to live by. And the breach of covenant is very painful, not just to the party affected, but to the whole community. Relationships are damaged. Our ability to trust is impacted. And the process of healing takes a long time and requires intentional work of repair. And the thing is that all parties must be willing to engage in this repair work, which is not an easy one, but it is possible if we care about the relationship and the person or the community that was affected by our behavior. Covenants are difficult because they're not the same as contracts. It's not the same with the cell phone company and the fine print that we missed. Because contracts are usually made for a limited time. They involve a specific offer. They're intended to protect the interests of both parties. And as long as both parties engage and agree to uphold, the contract works. But once one party exits or stops upholding their agreement, the contract is annulled. The other party is not required, not obliged to follow their responsibilities. Covenants are open-ended. They don't have an end date. They are intended to protect relationships and recognizes that all parties share an interest of everyone who is involved in this covenant. And then when it is violated, the covenant does not end. It does not get destroyed. The remaining parties then have the responsibility to continue to do what was agreed to and seek out healing. Our ability to manage these breaks demonstrate our commitment to the covenant. Because the covenant works as the North Star that guides us when times get hard, when we are in turbulent moments. They help us to orient ourselves, to set the road and serve like a guidepost through conflicts. And this is why we need those reminders and reinforcements to lift up the norms that we have agreed to follow. When there are no rules, there is chaos. And it's hard to know what to do. But when we have a covenant, those are our norms. And we set them because we know that we can do more together than we can do alone. So that is why we put love at the center and we begin again. We made it through with a few things here or there. And as we go forth, I offer you this benediction that was written by Emily Richards. May you leave this time together changed. May the promises you have made to yourself about who you want to be feel closer to the reality of who you are right now. May you share that feeling of transformation wherever you go. May it spread into every word, deed, thought, and interaction until we are all changed, transformed, and transforming together, becoming our better selves. Amen, and blessed be.